Alright, this video is about pickling my nadapenos. As many of you saw this year, I decided to try the new nadapeno pepper seeds that Baker Creek had. And what they are is they're a jalapeno that actually grows. It's got the exact flavor of a jalapeno. Oh, there's a pair of scissors that I picked up on clearance at Tractor Supply that are really amazing for using for harvesting. They basically have knife edges on the outside and real sharp scissors on the inside, and they do work good, and they're made by Fiskars. But the nadapenos really are just a jalapeno that has zero heat. All the flavor of the jalapeno, but absolutely no heat whatsoever. And I started 8 plants this spring and put them in, and they were kind of puny little plants, but over time they did catch up here, and they really not that giant plants, but they really are loaded with these nadapenos. They each one has quite a bit of veggies on there. You can see that basket holds about a half bushel when it's full, and it just turned out to be a little bit less than a half bushel there. So I got my picking of nadapenos today, and I'm going to go pickle them now. And every trip to the garden's another load, and some more cucumbers to pickle, and some more Chinese beans for dinner tonight, and some more squash to dehydrate. And so I'm going back up to the house now to start on my pickling my nadapenos. And basically, first thing you always start with, no matter whether the jars are new, old, or reused, just wash them really good. Use some real hot soap and water, and I have this really nice little sponge brush that makes it an easy job. But I always want to start out with really nice clean jars and make sure there's no contamination in there. So take the time to make sure that all the soap is actually rinsed out too, because that could really mess up your product in the end. So basically start by getting the jars prepared, and then what I'll do is I've got out all the canning goods now, and I'm just going to put some water in each of these jars to start out, and then I'm going to put them in the canning pot, and I'm also going to add some water around the outside there and start heating them up to sterilize them. And you see I got my cutting board out, and peppers and everything's all ready to go here. So first thing do is give them a good rinse off with cold water. I don't use any sprays or anything, so they're all pretty much clean and natural. But every once in a while you get a little piece of leaf or a little piece of dirt that's splashed up on them, so just want to rinse them good. And there's that batch that I picked there. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut them into slices, maybe about between 1/4 and 3/8 thick, and just go through them all, because this is the way I like to use them, especially when we make the nachos and stuff. So it takes a little time to go through and cut them, and I do leave the seeds in them because they do add a little bit of flavor. And then I'm just going to take one of the jars that I'm using, one of the empty jars, and use that as a gauge. I don't know exactly how many jars full of peppers I have here looking at them, so as I cut them, I'm just going to kind of fill them like I would when I'm canning, and give them a good shake to get them to pack down there, and this will give you a good indication of what you're dealing with the brine and everything else. So in the end, I actually wound up with 24 jars full, so I'm going to do 2 1-dozen batches here. And it does take a little time to cut them up, and there's enough for 24 jars, and there's the mess I made, and those are what are left, and I'll use them for poppers or other things. And how I keep track of the number of jars is I just throw the lid rings up there, so just in case I get distracted and lose count, I always know how many I have. So now I'm going to start by making up a batch of the brine, and this is a very simple brine. I found the recipe years ago on, I think it was the University of Florida website, and it's just a simple brine that I use for all my hot peppers, sweet peppers, and any type of peppers that I do. And it starts out with the vinegar, and you have to make sure that you use 5% vinegar whenever you're canning. That's pretty much a given fact. So it starts out with 10 cups there, and this is for my first batch of 12 jars. And then I'm going to throw in 2 cups of tap water. Now I have just well water, nice plain, no chlorine and everything. So, you want to use good water in there. And then I'm going to use 2 tablespoons of pickling and canning salt, they call it. It's a non-iodized type salt. And that's what you always use for canning. And then I'm just going to throw in 2 tablespoons of sugar in the end. And then this is some of that garlic I picked the other day and dried, so I'm just going to throw in 4 cloves of garlic. This goes in the pot and boils with the brine, but then you do not put it in the jars. You pick it out at the end. So these are just to add a little bit of flavor to the actual brine, and I like to just kind of peel all the that outer skin off the outside of it, just so you get all the flavor coming out of it. It's homegrown garlic is just amazing. Just has such a great smell. And then I'm gonna put it over low heat and start warming it up. Just kind of stir everything in there until it dissolves. And then my wife's telling me don't make a mess, so I got out these. I've got these silicone mats I bought on Amazon when we redid the countertops here, and they are really great to protect the counters during this kind of use. So in the meantime, my first dozen jars have been steaming for a while, so they were all sterilized and ready to start filling. So I'm just going to take 6 of them out to start with. I don't like taking them all out at once because they get cold by the time you get them filled. So basically, you're dealing with a lot of steam when you're canning and stuff, so you really have to be careful at this point that you don't get burned, or even if you have tender hands or something, you could always wear like a silicone glove or something like that to help protect you. So I'm using the 14-ounce size jars. I like using them for the jalapenos. They're just the right size. They don't take up a lot of room in the fridge, and they, they'll do a couple batches of nachos or stuff like that. And I just can't wait to try these nadapenos in nachos and stuff, because I used to love the warmer ones, but I just can't take the heat anymore. So this would be really a great change. Be able to get that flavor back. So I'm just gonna fill these up. These are what you call cold pack. I'm just you shake it good and try to get as many in there as you can, because they kind of bunch up if you don't. And with these, there's a 1/2 inch headspace, so you want to try to keep everything 1/2 inch from the top when you fill it also. So it takes a little while to get that batch of jars filled, and then I'm just gonna pull out the next batch and start on them. Now, if you don't like vinegar, something that's real vinegary, you may want to just do a search and look for different types of brines that you can use, because they're all different brines you can use for pickling, but in doing the peppers. But I kind of like this nice simple one. It's worked good for me, and it I feel it's got a nice flavor for the hot peppers or even the sweet peppers or any kind of pepper. So what you do, you have to boil that brine for 10 minutes. You bring it up to a boil while you're filling the jars and boil it for 10 minutes. And then I'm just going to go back now here and fill all the jars up to, well, I'm going to keep them down a little bit lower to start out with. Just kind of fill them up to the bottom of the ring there. And you can see the peppers start out a nice bright green, but as the longer that hot brine sits in there, the darker they get. They start turning into what really looks like a pickled jalapeno. So these funnels really help you. And then I take this little poking tool, and this is to get all the air out. You kind of wiggle things around in there and poke it in and out, and you'll see a lot of air bubbles come out. These things do, if they're turned sideways or anything like that, they do hold air. So you want all that out before you start canning. Once the air is out, just go back, and I use this little gauge here. 2 notches is a 1/2 inch, and peppers require a 1/2 inch headspace when you're doing them like this. So now the time, just go back and just bring everything right up to that exact 1/2 inch, and make sure everything's pushed down in there a 1/2 inch. So then then once everything's done, I take a damp paper towel and just go around the rings just to make sure I haven't gotten anything on there, like a pepper seed or anything else like that that might mess up your seal. And at this point, I'm gonna just wash the lids with some real hot soapy water. These new lids you're supposed to wash. You don't boil them anymore. And these actually are these are some lids I bought several years back. I bought a whole bunch of them. And these are actually ball lids, but they're labeled as Kerr. And from what I found out, Ball does own Kerr or makes Kerr's lids, so they're basically the same thing. Hopefully I'll be done with them this year, and then I'll switch over to the Amish style lids that are supposed to be a little more reliable. Then time to put the rings on there. And everything's really kind of hot at this point in time because of the boiling brine that you just put in there, so have to be real careful that you don't get burned, and just try to get the lids all. What I do is I try to get them all started in the beginning there. And then I just go back and I take that little jar holder there that's insulated, and I'll go back and I'll try to snug them all up and get them ready to put in the boiling water bath there. So it just takes a little snug on them. You don't want them real loose. So I go through and check all them there, and then it's time to put them back in the boiling water. And you can see I've got that pot turned up there, getting hot, ready to put them in. And these actually get processed for 10 minutes for pints or half pints, and these are actually 3/4 of a pint, so they get to 10 minutes too. And that's at sea level. You have to adjust your time for altitude. And then you need an inch of water over them before you start, so I had to go back and add more water and get the pot sealed up there. And then it's time to just turn it all the way up to high and give it a while till it comes up to a hard boil. And you can see that brine, I had enough left for probably about another jar and a half. So that was pretty close to 12 jars, that batch that I did. And now, while everything else is, the water's coming up to a boil, I'm going to start cleaning the next 12 jars here for the second batch. And the same thing over and over. It's, just have to keep everything good and clean. And just in between, just take the time and use it to prepare for the next one. And then I'm also going to start another full batch of the brine because, there wasn't really that much left, and I figured it doesn't pay to try to cut it down. So just going to, exact same thing, vinegar and the water and everything else and the garlic, and, start warming that up while the other ones are coming up to a boil. Now, once this hits a good hard boil like that, what you're going to do is you're going to start the timer. And, this is 10 minutes, like I said, so just put the timer on and just make sure it stays at a hard boil pretty much the whole way through processing. And at timeout, what I'm going to do is take the jars out. It's safer if you just leave the jars in and let it cool down, but seeing how I'm doing another batch right now, I'm just going to take all the jars out, and you have to be really careful because they're, they are extremely hot, and they're actually the contents inside the jars are a lot higher than a boiling temperature also. So there you can see everything's kind of floated to the top while processing, but that'll all settle out once it starts to cool. And then I have some wood racks that I place all my canning jars on when they come out. You don't want to set them on anything metal or stone or anything like that because they will actually, just the heat difference could make them crack. So there's the first batch out, and now it's time to start getting the next batch of jars in there. And this is where it gets a little tough when you're doing two batches in a row because that boiling water is in there, and you will have to get these jars basically filled with water so they don't float. And so I got them going. I filled the rest of the jars. Everything's all done. Just roll up this thing, put it away for the next time, and you can see no cleanup required. That down, and here's the 24 jars. I just have to let them sit there and cool. And well, meanwhile, we're gonna have some dinner here. We're having some zucchini fritters tonight, and some fresh Chinese long beans that were picked today. And now everything's clean, so I took took the lids off, washed everything down good, and I made some labels for them with that Cameo 3. That thing's just amazing for labeling stuff like this. And so I popped the labels on, and now these are all ready to go down in the root cellar and, be consumed over the next couple of years. So, here you can pretty much see everything comes right out of the garden in the morning, and, we try to get it right into the jars within, a couple minutes there, and process it and just get it out of the way. So this is, how we preserve our food. Now, if you have another 2 minutes to spare, I'm going to show you a total fail that I had yesterday. I had this batch of pickles that I made up there, the dill pickles and the brine. They were ready to can. And instead of using quart jars like I usually do, I got this idea I was going to go pick up some half-gallon jars and get out my turkey fryer and do them. Now, what I did is I went online, and it turns out the FDA says do not use half-gallon jars. You can't process them safely. But then I saw people that said, well, we do them anyway, and we just add 10 minutes to the time. Well, this is what we wound up calling them, because the pickles actually, you can see right there, they just, while processing, they expanded in the jar, and they grew probably about 20%, and they are just jammed right in there. I don't know what happened to them. I think they're probably going to be ruined and mushy or something like that. But I've never seen anything like this. The pickles are like probably 20% bigger than when they went in there, and they're just tight packed, squished together now. So now I know why the FDA says don't try this at home, and don't use these half-gallon jars. I found out the hard way, but I'm just going to put them in my root cellar for a joke now, because I don't think they're really going to be edible. I called them the first 4 words out of my mouth after seeing what happened to them. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.